Cunningham!
Can't be. Look at my car! Come on, prick! We're not finished yet! Come on!
All right, everyone, you can thank me now because I brought in a legend. We're going to clean this place up a little bit and do some damage with actor, politician, human rights activist, William Ostrander. How are you, William? How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you, Ethan. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is a privilege for us. Everyone knows the resume. You've got some epic bullet points with some epic creative people, but I don't know if they fully know how invested you are in mankind. You did a tour of duty in Africa to help people. You got into politics to stop what would we call corporate money, like PAC money, correct? But why don't you take it from the beginning? You were a farmer. You wanted to be a farmer in Indiana when life started out for you. But take us through the early days of William's existence.
Well, I grew up in Indiana, and my father really didn't want to farm, and he went back to school and got his master's in electrical engineering. So, I wanted to cling on to the farm dream, but it wasn't going in the direction that I had hoped that it would. And also, family farms tend to follow the patriarchal lineage rather than matriarchal, and my mom was part of a larger farming operation, and that wasn't going to go anywhere for me. So I, for whatever reason, elected that I was going to be a stunt driver for the movies. Because that was kind of my reputation in high school as the driver, because I didn't smoke pot. And when I did get drunk, it was just to completely obliterate myself. And a few times of that, my mother kind of looked at me and she said, I don't know why anybody plans on being sick the next day. And I went, God, that's brilliant. So I stopped drinking as well. So I oftentimes was a person who was tasked with driving. And when you're in high school, you want to go, man. You test the limits of that vehicle and the roads, and hopefully you don't have any cops chasing you, although we did that a few times too. And so it seemed like a natural outlet for me to, because I wanted to get out of where I was at. I really didn't like growing up. I didn't really like the environment where I grew up, I should say that. And so I thought I'd be a stunt driver. But part of that is because, the Midwest is a little bit oppressive. There, from my point of view, they don't really want you to be unique and individual. They want you to get a good job and brag about how little sleep you got because you work so long, and you go to church, and you basically blend in. You're wallpaper like everybody else. And if you're not, you're immodest. There's almost something like religiously speaking that you're a show off or something. If you wanted to do anything unique or different. So I kind of justified what I wanted to do, which is basically get out. And I thought I'd go to be an actor. And so by the time I left home and got to the Illinois border from Indiana, I kind of went, I would rather be an actor. So I went up to Seattle and in the Puget Sound area for a while. I drove a bulldozer and sold clothes and tried to save up enough money to get down to Hollywood. And I got down to Hollywood in October of '78, 2 weeks after I was 19, and I got a film a week after I was here.
Yeah, that's good timing. Now, when you get to Hollywood, had you ever been here before when you arrived?
No, it was first time ever.
What was the first thing you remember seeing when you get to this town? This town can be unforgiving, but what was the first thing you remember seeing?
Well, probably one of my strongest memories happened to be that I was driving a really terrible car. My father had bought a '74 Pinto station wagon, and that's sort of become my inheritance. And when I was in Washington State, I had let this guy borrow my car, and he backed it up with the door open, and it caught one of those posts that you have at the gas stations, to block people from running over the machines, what do you call it? The
pumps?
Pumps. Thank you. And so my car door wouldn't open. It was a 4-cylinder vehicle back in the early '70s. And you know how those, the rings would go bad in those, and they start smoking and stuff after a while. So I've driven all night because I couldn't afford a hotel. Drove all night from Seattle down to Los Angeles. And I'm just looking around and I'm so happy. I'm on Wilshire Boulevard and I look over and next to me there's a Rolls Royce and it pulls up and I'm like, wow, I've never seen one of those before in Indiana. There's like a Rolls Royce, a Mercedes Benz and a Ferrari, like all in a line kind of a thing. And I look over and I'm smiling and I notice that my blue smoke from my disgusting Pinto is now wafting into the window of this Rolls Royce, and he just looks at me sideways with contempt and rolls his window up to stop my car. And I thought, okay, I'm in a new world here.
Way to bring those guys down to earth. So you got a job on Joey Travolta. Was it Joey?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a week out. But how does one get a job in town for a week?
Just, luck. I mean, I think that's part of the entire show business
Correct.
process is luck. There's a lot of that. I happen to, I got a paper called the Drama Log. I don't even know if they print it anymore, but back in those days, the Drama Log came out. It was kind of like a weekly rag for actors and people,
Yeah.
associated with actors. Do you remember it? Did you ever see it?
Yeah, oh, yeah. It's kind of a classic piece of print. I think they should put a few of those in the Smithsonian.
Yeah, right. So they don't print anymore, right?
No, they don't.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Well, at any rate, I'd opened it up and I was looking through it, intrigued by what this was. And I saw an ad in the back of it, classified ads that said New York, 18 and 25-year-old New York looking ethnic types. And back then I kind of had this haircut like Vinny or like Travolta did in Saturday Night Fever. And I looked a lot like Travolta then. And so I had a leather jacket. I had the hair sort of, combed backwards. And I thought, well, this is why I'm here. So I might as well go to it. It was,
Yeah.
and I'd never acted before other than, like a play at church once or, a few things. But I decided I would go and I was late getting there because I was intimidated by the process. And I got there and there's this whole hallway full of guys all trying to look like New York, gangsters or something. And they eventually brought me in, and I started talking like that, like somehow I'd been to New York. I was from New York. I'd never been to New York in my life, but I knew enough about the accent that I could kind of fake it through. So they asked me my name. I said I'm William Ostrander, and they talked to me for a second, and then there was these two girls that came in with me, and bada bing, I was the first person they hired to play on a gang with Joey Travolta. We were called the
Nice. Now,
Night Crawlers, by the way.
do you remember what the day rate was on that?
Oh, it's a non-union picture. I got like $20 a day.
But you were probably completely excited to be a part of it, right? You're in the
Oh, are you
environment.
kidding?
Yeah, you're in the production trenches. You're learning it. And you
You
like
call
Joey,
back
right?
to
What's that?
what's that?
No, I didn't mean to talk over you. You were going to say something. I apologize.
I was just going to say, are you kidding? You come from the farm in Indiana and you be able to
Yeah.
call back home and say, "Hey, I'm in a film." I mean, that was pretty, heady stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. And I mean, I was hired as an actor. I wasn't, like an extra. I had a role through the whole movie. I had one line, in the movie. So I was thrilled to be able to be there and do that.
Now, what was the line?
No, just a nurse down the hall.
Gold, gold.
Yeah,
Now we know.
yeah.
Now we know why the career has been so incredible, right? Look at the beginnings. So, did you land an agent shortly after that, or how did things unfold for you?
Um, well, I didn't choose to get an agent right away.
Hmm.
I had there's so many stories I could tell you here, so I have to kind of sift through and think, well, what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. But I had a vehicle that needed to be repaired, and in the meantime, I was looking around for places where I could go to an acting school because I was told when I was in Seattle by this man that, well, you should probably go to acting classes. And I thought, oh, well, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
So I went, I started looking around, and there was a place called Staircase Studios, which was on the corner of Olympic and Fairfax. And I went there, and I had like $150, and total to my name, and the classes were $100 for a 2-month class. So I said, okay, well, here's $100. I mean, I gave away 2/3 of everything I had. I didn't have
Yeah.
food, but I decided to sign up for that class. And I was sort of taken under the wing of a few people there that I guess they thought I had some potential, so they told me, no, 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 take your time and learn your craft before you get out there. And so I spent a couple of years doing that first. In retrospect, I'm not sure that was the right choice, but it's what I did. And it was a tremendous education.
I mean, you come to town and you're on a roll right out of the gate. I don't know that we stop the do we stop the cavalcade to practice? I think we're going to have to kind of marshal up as we go, would be my advice. I mean, you're obviously on the hip machine, you
Well,
know?
I didn't understand then, so I was
Right,
taking the
right.
advice of elders, and these were people um, that had worked in their whole lives in the business. So I was
Yeah.
trying to take their advice, and as I said, maybe in retrospect, I would do it differently today. But in general, is probably good advice to do that for most people and for most situations.
Well, leave it to a radio host to like armchair his way into your, to relitigate your past decisions. I think honestly, it's not a bad thing to practice up, however you do it. And look, for you, it paid off. What was the next job? Was that Lou Grant?
Um, I can't remember which came first. I did Lou Grant, and then I was hired for a pilot called My Sister Irene.
Mhm.
Um, or no, was it just Irene or My Sister Irene? With Irene Cara. Remember the singer from Fame?
Yeah, awesome.
You're gonna live forever.
Yeah.
She was tapped to do a pilot called Irene, and I played in that first pilot. I was the boyfriend of one of her roommates, and I had this line where I had to say, "No, I'm sick and tired of being treated like a stud." One of my other famous lines. So I did that one, Lou Grant. I had another non-union picture that I did before I got my card called Buddy McCoy, and then I did Fire and Ice is where I got my
Oh,
Screen Actors Guild card on.
In an age of myth and legend, the world trembles before the power of Necron, master of evil, ruler of ice. Against him stand Tigra, princess of Firekeep, and captive of the ice demons, Larn, last of a mighty warrior tribe, and her only hope of escape. And Dark Wolf, mysterious avenger, and sworn enemy of the Ice Tyrant. Their courage will be tested. The challenge must be met. The final battle between the armies of the cold and the keepers of the flame is about to begin. Fire and Ice, from the visual imagination of Ralph Bakshi and the dazzling artistry of Frank Frazetta. A fantasy adventure from 20th Century Fox.
nice.
Yeah.
Before we get into Fire and Ice, I gotta say your lines of dialogue are gonna make great chapter titles in the biography. We're already off to a rocket start. Fire and Ice is pretty legendary, and it's kind of seen as an influence. I mean, I worked in the office of John Milius at Warner Brothers, and he was a big
Mm.
Frazetta fan.
Oh
In
yeah.
fact, he even appeared in a documentary. They shot a documentary while I worked there
Mm.
with Milius contributing to it, and Fire and Ice was kind of like one of those pivotal. Did you know when you're doing this, like, because you're a couple of voices in it, you're a couple of different characters, correct?
Yeah, I'm the lead voice in it, and
Right.
that was originally played. That was done by rotoscoping, and I don't know if people know what that means. You probably know what it means, right? Rotoscoping.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for whoever's listening, it's basically they shoot us in black and white on a soundstage, and in one case, we shot outdoors. And unlike in the old Disney films where, they had photographs of a deer like Bambi, and the artist would draw the movements. And there was, of course, 26 frames per second. So they would do every frame. It was incredibly tedious and time consuming. So what they did and what Ralph Bakshi did is update that by filming us like that and then using computers to color us in. So the movements are literally our own movements animated, and then all the backgrounds are drawn in as opposed to the other way around. So yeah, I did that picture and got to meet Frank Franzetta, as the artist whose work was inspired Ralph Bakshi, and it was a unique picture.
Well, walk me through the meeting with Frank. How'd that go?
Well, first of all, I guess I should say that I played Randy Norton's character. Randy Norton was the body. I was the voice for that. And then when we went in to do, all of our lines and things like that, dubbing, um, Ralph asked me to do that character, but I also play Prince Taro in the movie, and then I play a number of other voices of the subhumans. The meeting with Frank was just on set, very casual, nice guy, had a kind of a 50s look to him, kind of kept that slick back hair look that was common
Yeah.
in the 50s, but a very nice guy, and his artwork is still being promoted by his granddaughters, I think it is. We had some contact with them just recently because the Fire and Ice Pictures is, to my surprise, is still somewhat regarded as a classic by animation people.
Oh yeah, for sure. Milius would use Frazetta's art in the sequel script for Conan. That's what he was developing when I was there. King Conan, Crown of Iron, the Warshawskis, Matrix
Mm,
fame, were right next door. They were supposed to produce it. But I remember he put it in there because he thought the executives weren't going to understand the tone of the
mm.
script. And Fire and Ice may have even, a couple of Fire and Ice images may have even made the cut. I'm not sure. But he's got good taste if they did, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So is this after this? Wait, what came first, Christine or North and South?
Christine.
So was that next after Fire and Ice? Because Fire and Ice, I'd
No.
imagine that Fire and did you expect Fire and Ice to get the recognition it deserved or recognition it got at the time, or what's your thinking?
It was not Ralph Bakshi's most famous picture at the time, or I don't know. I don't even know statistically whether or not it was the most commercially successful of all of his projects. He did American Pop, which I think probably was a bigger commercial success than Fire and Ice, and he also had done Fritz the Cat, that R-rated movie,
Yeah.
and he did Lord of the Rings. So I don't know how that falls within, the commercial success compared to others. But it was certainly a great experience. And Ralph Bakshi's a wonderfully colorful character. He kind of talked like this. He had sort of a kind of a lisp almost. And so whenever he talked, he got really excited. There was always spit flying. And
Yes.
I enjoyed Ralph really, very much, and I'm grateful to him for that opportunity. Our audition, by the way, was composed of doing stunts in a park out in North Hollywood. We had to go out there and we had to jump out of trees and hit these trampoline things, these little cheerleader trampolines, and act like an animal and kind of scurry around and whatnot. That was what he was looking for, was a certain athletic prowess, and I was chosen in part because of that and because I could climb a rope with just my arms without my legs.
Well, you bring a touch of physicality to your work. I'm guessing that's the park on. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably the Tahunga Magnolia Park, the big one, right? Maybe where guys got space to kind of
Maybe,
experiment.
something I can't remember. It was so many years ago. But no, after Fire and Ice, I'm trying to remember the chronology. Was it Mike's Murder or
It might have been
Stryker?
Mark's. It might have been Mike's murder. I mean, Stryker. We were talking a bit about that, and you had the opportunity to do your own stunts, so you enjoyed
I
that.
did.
And do you get
Oh,
stunt
yeah.
pay? Did you get stunt pay in addition to your pay in Stryker, or did you just get that?
No.
This is tomorrow, the day after the end. A world once destroyed, now reborn, without rules, without justice, without water. Only the strongest survive. This is a land he calls home. They call him Stryker. Amazon warriors prowl the wasteland, wanted for their secret. The last clear spring on Earth.
Where did you get the water?
Stryker, one last hero taking one last chance.
Everybody's got their own highway to hell. You got yours, I got mine.
life, and when a drop is worth fighting for. Stryker knows a truckload is worth dying for. This is the ultimate fight for life.
You don't talk much, do you?
People only listen to what they want to hear.
Is this the end of all that is left? Or a legend about to begin?
Get ready.
Their odds are 1,000,000 to 1. Stryker's the one. Stryker.
No, I was, and I wouldn't have demanded it. You know what I mean? It was just, how much fun is that to play like that when, you can be on vehicles and jumping off of them and breaking crap. And, that was, I enjoy doing stunts,
Yeah.
those if they'll let me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, that
Stryker-
was shot in the Philippines, right?
Right.
And in the Philippines, they don't have the union rules that we have here. So as I was telling you, earlier, I'm jumping off of a car onto a moving water truck and on from a water truck falling backwards on a moving car. I don't have pads on. There's no safety harnesses. There's none of that. There's no stunt man. It's just me doing it like you're a high school kid, with your buddies trying to make your own film. So it was great. And there was a lot of dangerous stuff there that the Filipino stuntmen did that, would have broken bones, it seems like, and they never wore anything to pads or protective gear. They just kind of toughed it out, which is kind of fun to see. And I mean, it's not the right way to go about it, but you were always kind of amazed that they were willing to do that stuff.
Yeah, man, some gutsy people. I mean, for the Philippines, I think that's why Apocalypse Now has so many moments in it, is because it was just the pilots, all the crew that surrounded the American cast members was ready for anything. Light me on fire, kick me off, kick me through a hut.
Oh yeah,
whatever.
The double for Marlon Brando was on our film, actually.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, the double for Marlon Brando. He's a huge guy. He's like 6'4", and God, he must have weighed 325 pounds if he weighed a penny, or a pound. But I was talking to him about that. I said, what did you do, and what did he have to do? And he was the guy, because Brando was enormous at that time, right? He was very obese, and he did as little as he possibly could. So he told this guy in that scene where Brando's walking out of the tunnel, and he's got his hand out, and he's like touching the wall or something like that as he strides along. Do you remember that scene? I remember it vividly.
Yeah.
And that was this double guy that did that, and he told me that Brando had instructed him to do that and walk through the cave, touching the wall. It was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Can you imagine getting instructions from Brando?
Yeah, that would have been fun.
What's that? Go ahead.
A few years ago, Brando's stuff after he passed came up online. I don't know if you ever saw this, but there was like an auction of Brando's stuff, and he had a pair of cowboy boots, and I thought, oh, that'd be just kind of clever just to have a pair of those. And I didn't bid on it, and they went for like $65 or something like that. And it's, there was two surprises. One, that it went that small or went for that low price, and the other one was that his shoes would be that small. They're like 8.5. So it's like,
yeah,
God, were you that short, or you just had abnormally small feet?
It's probably something he lifted from like Missouri Breaks or something. Just
could have been, but I would have liked to have had them now.
Yeah, man, for sure. It's funny because you mentioned Apocalypse and how like Coppola had so much stress on the film, but particularly when Brando showed up because he was supposed to be the special forces guy. And that led to the infamous, like, just darken the scenery. We're going to try to camouflage him. There's nothing we can do. And of course, Brando was paid $1 million a week or something, and decided upon arrival to go down the river on his houseboat so he can get the roll straight in his head, and that was going to take a number of weeks to do before. It's like, what the, it's like, oh my gosh. But by that point, I think Apocalypse Now was becoming like Apocalypse When is this going to, anyway, the stories are pretty infamous. I mean, I met Coppola once in Milius's office, and it's the kind of meeting you'll never forget. But I do love that you get a chance to work with someone in the trenches with Brando, because he probably witnessed some crazy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, some canned crazy. So that in itself makes the experience on Stryker just worth it right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on, do you look back at some of these films, and do you have like a couple of favorite moments? I know I asked you that, but the audience wasn't there to hear it. And do you have like you did say you had a couple of things that stood out that you were quite proud of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how story worthy they are to anyone else, but in answer to your question, when we were talking about Stryker, for example, that getting to do my own stunts was just a riot because it was like playing as a kid with grown-up toys. So as I'm jumping back and forth between a water truck and a moving Mustang going down the road at whatever speed they were, it wasn't super fast, obviously, but and then having this fight on top of this truck and throwing this guy off the truck with no pads, no landing, no landing pad or anything like that. I threw this guy from like a 12-foot high truck onto the ground.
That is gold,
as we're moving.
By the way.
Yeah,
that is gold.
Yeah. Why do we need unions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, at one point I didn't even realize this tank was wood until I picked this guy up and I went through the tank. I mean, I literally sank down to my hips, in this tank. And I had just, in the scene take before that had rolled off of it and, like kind of thrown myself alongside of the tank upside down and was holding on to this wood bar. I didn't know it was wood. I thought it was metal. And I grabbed it. It was like the thickness of a broomstick, and there I am, like diving off this truck as going down the road and grab this thing and do a flip, and flip down and hang off of the side and then realize later that the whole thing was wood. It could have easily have broken and fallen under the truck.
Where is Stryker 2? Where's Stryker Part 2?
Oh, you know what? It turned out to be a really terrible film. I don't recommend necessarily people ring out and seeing that, but it actually had the premise of Road Warrior, right? And that was a really good. The premise actually was better in my opinion because it was about water rather than fuel. If you have an apocalypse, you can't eat fuel, but water is a necessary ingredient. So the idea of this film is that the atmosphere changed as a result of this nuclear warfare, and it dried up a lot of the fresh water, and so there's a constant competition for water. So, it was a good film, but it wasn't executed very well.
Well, that's where we're headed with all the data centers, right? So you guys better,
yeah, right.
Better dig a cache of weapons in like a Mexican desert now, because we're going to be calling on it shortly. We're going to need the arsenal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But okay, so in addition to doing your own stunts, obviously anyone who can brag about that is in an awesome position. But moving on, I mean, I think you were talking about how much you enjoyed working with Carpenter.
Oh yeah. Well, that was one of my other favorites that you'd ask about was getting a chance to beat up that car. Christine, one of the most common questions I get when I do autograph shows is, or any kind of an interview is did it bother you to smash that car? And people need to remember this was 1983, right? And that Plymouth Fury was in 1958. So it's a 25-year-old car. It only that year qualified as an antique. And it would be similar today is like asking you if you have a problem beating up a 2001 Chrysler PT Cruiser. I mean, would that bother you? I mean, nobody thought of it as a classic. at that time. So, when somebody gives me a sledgehammer and paying me to go destroy something with no consequences other than applause, I mean, what a great time.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And I had a scene in the beginning of that scene. I asked you if you had noticed about this when I went in to smash the car, that I wanted Buddy Repperton to be a little bit cool. I mean, he was an older guy. He had to find his moments, right? So as we're coming into Darnell's shop and I'm standing in front of the car, I take my jacket off and I huck it over to the right. And I had seen before when we were started setting up the scene that there was like a bar or something that stuck out from the wall. So I was about, I don't know, 10 to 12 feet away from that. And I hurled my coat over there like that. And it caught on that hook and just hung there. And I thought, yeah.
Yeah, that's a slick move, bro.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. You love that when your actors bring like those little extra moments. One of the things I loved about your approach is you said you had like an A, B, and C scenario in mind when you reported to the set to keep it easy on Carpenter. You're like, I can do it three ways. I really admire an actor's approach who's got it all worked out and just gives the opportunity for the director to kind of hone from there. And I think that's really awesome that you got a chance to actually demonstrate your skill set because you become you're like a legendary villain in that.
Hmm.
And the movie itself has gone on to be like this Hallmark classic. And I don't mean Hallmark as in the Hallmark Channel, but I mean in like the pantheon of great movies. And I was looking at that and I love the casting. And I wondered, like, did you take the opportunity to hang around the set when you weren't shooting to kind of see what was going on? Because Terry Leonard's on that. The guy who gave
Yeah.
me my start in show business, Jack Philbrick, is like the second AD on it.
Yeah.
And there were so many great people, co-Brits. It makes me wonder, like this, an actor who's cutting his teeth and learning the business. Do you hang out and watch Harry Dean Stanton work, or are you like pretty much like I'm beat? I'm going to the hotel. I'm going home.
Well, I was opportunistic, but it wasn't always either appropriate or the scene the film location was quite a distance away,
Yeah.
or it was filmed in the middle of the night or something. So, Keith Gordon, because he was in the movie quite a bit more than I, and his ambition had always been to become a director. He was there able to kind of uh, learn from Carpenter and be on the set a lot more than I was. I certainly took opportunities to go to the set when I could, uh, but it wasn't really under the idea that I was going to go there and learn filmmaking at that time. But yeah, we had Harry Dean Stanton, Robert Prosky. I mean, terrific actors, and
Mm.
there were just a lot of great talent on that. Terry Leonard, I've talked to a few times after the film, just in the last few years. What a great stuntman! What a great guy! You know,
Yeah.
uh, he was in that car when the car gets smashes into my car, and then makes another charge into the gas station and sets it on fire.
Right.
He was, he's in that car, and the car stalled the first time they went in there, and they had all the fire, and he realized that, or maybe he knew that before they actually had the full on flames, because they could only do it once, that, the engine was going to lose oxygen because that fire was pulling so much oxygen that the car wouldn't be able to breathe and run. So
Yeah.
he had to actually take a pipe from the intake manifold and put it into the cab of the car so that it had enough oxygen to keep running so that he could back out of those flames. And then when he started heading towards me and, smashing the gas pumps, he couldn't hardly see. I mean, because the glass was all blacked out,
Yeah.
so he could hardly even see, and yet he managed to do all that. So he was impressive.
Asshole.
Watch this.
this asshole some of his own medicine.
He's backing up too.
Some shithead's following me. I just hope he comes in here.
Cunningham?
Can't be. Look at my car. Come on, prick! We're not finished yet! Come on!
No, that guy is every bit the legend we say he is. He came by Milius's office once and said he broke every bone in his body twice.
Yeah.
And I think he's the guy who gets blown out of the Huey in Apocalypse on Fire. And I know he had doubled for Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones, but Christine in particular, because I mean these are the day. I mean, now you could rig that up with cameras and the driver would be able to see. But now in those days it's dark. He can't see out the windshield, but he's probably got like the full like death firefighter suit with the hood and the shield. He's probably got it all in there, so he probably can't even see where the steering wheel is.
Yeah.
So I could see him doing like driving that thing for hours, try to get a feel for it. But I mean, here's the other thing too. It's got to be executed flawlessly or you're going to lose a man.
Yeah, I don't even think he practiced all that much, to be honest. I'm not sure. I mean, he might tell you otherwise, but I think he pretty much kind of figured out what was going on with the oxygen, got in, tried it, saw his lines, and then did it because we couldn't do that scene again. Once you set that place on fire, you're done. I mean, Terry told me a story once where he was going for the highest cardboard fall, and you probably know what that means, right? Like instead of having an airbag, they had a bunch of cardboard boxes that you're supposed to fall into. And he jumped from like a 6th story to land on those boxes, and he overjumped. And he said everybody walked away like he died when he hit because he hit so hard. And he was in the hospital for a couple of days on that one. And he had to do another stunt in Spain where he had to ride a horse through some sugar glass on a second story, and the horse was blinded so that he couldn't see where he was going or he wouldn't have done it. Jumps through this glass and overshot the ramp, and because they were in a hurry, and Terry said, "Well, I should have put more sand there, and I knew it, but we in a hurry, so I just went and did it." And he flew off the end of it, and he ended up under the horse. Everybody thought he died on that one. He had to be air flown to a hospital, and he was blind for a few days. I mean, yeah, that guy is the real deal.
Man, this is why I didn't become a stunt guy. I don't mind getting on the phone and being like, "Hold up, I got a guy. I can call him." But like I think the fall you might even be talking about. I mean, Jerry Lopez always talked about the Conan drop.
Yeah,
where it was several stories, and that was the thing that blew me away too. Is they put boxes. He was like, they put boxes down there, and I'm like, that is fucking berserk.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not sure this one was the Conan movie, but it was still shot in Spain, so I could be wrong.
Yeah, but it raises the question. It just gets the thought process going of like, wait, that's our technology. We're gonna hit these boxes.
Yeah.
We're gonna hit boxes, folks. But
yeah.
I mean, he's so impressive, and the guy just absolutely like I wonder if he's ever said no to a stunt in a
That's
script.
a good question. I don't know. Can't remember. But you already mentioned he was the guy that went underneath the truck, using a bullwhip, as the thing is driving along. He did the same stunt with a bunch of horses in a stagecoach, and the stagecoach ran over his leg, and he thought he'd torn off his leg, and it was broken, I think, or maybe just bruised. But he said he reached down to make sure his leg was still there.
I think in the life and times of Terry Leonard, when you're dragged behind like an old Mercedes Nazi truck, that's an easy day. He's probably like, this is a breeze. Hold my coffee.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Yeah,
I'll be right back. Like, that sounds so easy compared to what the guy went through. Now, when that movie wraps, you've got a bit of time before it hits, and then it comes out, and you get a chance to experience the premiere. I mean, Carpenter was a really, really always has been an interesting filmmaker. So and Stephen King obviously wrote the story. Yeah. So do you get a chance to see this in the theaters and be like, wow, like what's the impression when you get to see yourself in this movie? What goes through your head?
Panic, fear, embarrassment. Really? Oh yeah. I mean, I don't like watching myself on screen. And we saw the film for the first time. I say we, Alexandra, Paul, who's in the film, and I were dating at the time. And we went to the film, and it was at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences on Wilshire Boulevard. And they had the red carpet out, and lots of the press was there, and some celebrities. And it was my first sort of big premiere that I'd gotten to do. And we arrived in a limousine and done all of that. That was just, all the Hollywood hype that you're so, keen about when you're a young kid, that you want to be successful or whatever. And so we went in and watched the film. But by the time the film, just about when the credits were rolling, we left the film because you don't know what to expect when you're going in to see what you've done. You don't have any idea which take the directors used and how they cut you and how they didn't, what scenes they cut out and what scenes they left in. And you're always left with this feeling like, well, what about that? Or, oh, I could have done this better. And, I don't know. That's kind of how I feel. Maybe I'm just insecure. But I just felt a little bit uncomfortable with that process. Maybe I'd be better now. But then I felt terribly anxious about the whole process.
Was there anything missing from what your character did? Is there any scenes missing or?
The only scene that was really missing from my stuff is, more footage about destroying the car. At one point, I ripped the hood off of the car over the engine. I rip it off and take it with both hands and hurl it away, but they chose to shorten that stuff. One little quirk in the film that is kind of a trivia piece is there's a place in the film where I'm arguing with the shop teacher, and I say, yeah, try it, and I'll throw you through the wall, you little bald fuck. Right? But that's not the way I did it. what I did is, I'll throw you through the wall, you little bald fuck. But in covering the shot for the close-up of David, who was playing the teacher, I got right up next to the camera, and when I said fuck, my head came forward and got into frame. But John liked that take, so he just decided to add the second fuck. So the second fuck is actually from a whole another take that I had done, and he just cut it in. So it's fuck instead of just fuck.
You know what? Somewhere at the time, a phone was ringing in an executive's office, and they go, "Congratulations, we just got our R rating," which is probably what we wanted all along.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
So I'm sure it played right into the executive's hands, and it's a nice job. I mean, again, that's a room full of great actors.
And to be honest, that film probably had more profanity in it than any film other than, Pacino and Scarface at that point. I mean, most people don't think of it that way, but how many films do you hear the word cunt?
Yeah.
Right? And we say cunt face, or I say cunt face or cuntingham, and blah, 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 multiple times through this film. Nobody had done that before. And the number of profanities what put us right up there. I think we got the R rating for that is more than anything.
I can see you saying, "Hey, Mom, I've got a new movie coming out. Maybe don't see this one."
Now, I'll tell you the one that was the most embarrassing for me. Did you ever see Mike's Murder with Deborah Winger?
I just watched it because we were talking about it, so I bounced to it. Yeah, Deborah Winger, bit of a legend.
Yeah. And Paul Winfield, fantastic actor. And anyway, in that movie, I play a stripper, or I want to be stripper, right? So my biggest ambition is to work, like do a Chippendales kind of a show. And so I do this whole strip in the film. It's part of the film. And, when the film came out, it was maybe the second biggest thing or one of the bigger projects that I had done at that time. I mean, James Bridges was Urban Cowboy, China Syndrome, 9/20/55. He had written Absence of Malice. I mean, he was a very successful producer, writer, director. So, this was getting a lot of media attention. And I grew up in Indiana, as I told you. So, and on the farm. So all of our farmer neighbors decided to go see this picture. And there I am doing a strip. To think that Herb and Dorothy Keenert saw me, stripping in a movie was not, I'm glad I didn't have to see them after that.
Hey, man, this is the price we pay as professionals, right? This is the life we have chosen.
Somebody's got to do it.
Exactly. Somebody has got to do it, and they're doing it for pay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So looking back on some of these things, I mean, you still probably have a bit of demand for Fire and Ice and Christine on the convention circuit, where you get every crazy question that people can put to you. But as a professional, like, what do you think, looking back on your tour of duty on all these movies that you ended up doing? And there's North and South in there too, which was a big project.
Yeah.
Opposite Patrick Stewart or Patrick Swayze.
Right.
The other Patrick, the American Patrick.
Yeah.
And just an incredible cast. And that was a big time deal. Like, that was a huge deal for television when that came out. In fact, I think even Elizabeth Taylor's in that.
Oh, you know what? My dear Aunt Leela was one of those huge Elizabeth Taylor fans, where she had dyed her hair black and painted in the eyebrows, did basically all the cosmetics that Elizabeth Taylor was known for. Mm-hmm. And when I was called in for that, I was originally called in for the character that Philip Kasnoff played, which is, I forgot his name in the movie right now, but he's one of the three leads. He was one of the three guys that was supposed to go to West Point along with James Reed and Patrick Swayze. And I tested for that because they thought that would be the role for me. But I'm 7 years younger than James Reed, and who's still a friend of mine. And Patrick Swayze was also older than me. So they ended up casting Philip instead of me because of the age, and then they gave me Forbes Lamont, which, I was grateful to play. But my huge disappointment, my great disappointment, there have been two, at least two. One, that I didn't get to play Jim Morrison, and two, that I had this opportunity. I was so close to being able to be in a scene with Elizabeth Taylor, which would have just been great to have that experience. And Philip got to have the scene with Elizabeth Taylor, and I think it was her only scene in the whole movie or miniseries. But unfortunately, I missed that one. That was a disappointment.
Have you seen that recently, North and South?
Bits and pieces of it. You'll be someplace and the film comes on and people will see it, or people have asked for autographs, or somewhere it's playing. I had a reunion gathering a couple of years back, and I saw little bits of it, but it's not something that I sit down to watch. I mean, that's a long show.
Yeah, you definitely have to be dedicated, but I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. I mean, it's pretty interesting once you get into it. Take me to working with David Lynch.
David Lynch. He's unique, and I will be honest with you. I had a very small part in that, and part of the reason that I had a small part in that is I had a son who died, and I was in, as you can imagine, kind of rough shape from that. And I had a family that I needed to support, and health insurance was a big deal. So I hadn't really been actively pursuing acting at that time because I'd done this work in Africa that took me out of the whole game for a little while. But when I came back and after my son died, I called a couple of friends and I just, in the industry, and I said, hey, if there's something that comes up that I can do to help keep my health insurance, that's what I would like to do. And I was fortunate then that I was given an opportunity to work in that picture. I had to, of course, meet the casting director and pass the test, if you will. But they eventually put me in that. So I was only in that for a minute, kind of a thing. But David Lynch is one of those rare people who's an auteur, And I don't know how many people can appreciate this unless you've been in the business. But when you take, let's say, 200 people and millions of dollars and constant movement, and you put that all together, there are very few people who can express their distinct personality from start to finish. And David was one of those rare people who could do that. His imprimatur was so strong, and his choices and the way he went about it were so unique to him that you knew was at the end of it was going to be a unique story, and that was true of Mulholland Drive.
Do you have like a Lynchian moment where you could, like, if you were telling a story without using the pronoun, that people could tell you're talking about David Lynch?
Well, maybe. This is not one that I experienced, but I remember him saying something to the effect that he went to a therapist once, and when he sat in front of the therapist, he said, "Okay, so the idea of this is to get rid of my demons," and the therapist casually said, "Well, yeah, basically, yes, is to help you rid yourself of some of these demons." And he said, "Okay, thank you," and he left because he felt that some of those demons were part of his inspiration for his storytelling.
Yeah.
The only sort of first-hand experience that I had in that respect is that when we were filming there, one of the characters in the film had to wear headphones, and the headphones had Sony written in the side of them in white. And he didn't want to see that because it was a close-up on the guy. So he was asking the cast or the crew, he's asking the crew of how they could get rid of that, and it was the only set of headsets they had. And one of the things that, once again, that I regret is that, I didn't speak up, because at that moment I said, take a magic marker and just, blot out the white, with the magic marker. But I was intimidated because it was my first day on the set, and I just didn't want to say something that wouldn't go over well. I didn't want to get in the way of somebody else on the crew and things like that, so I didn't. But he was a unique guy.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about a therapy session with Lynch, because I think of the possibilities of Lynch walking in to talk to a psychologist and the psychologist just giving it all up after like 10 minutes of like, don't you just see the psychologist being like, I don't know if I can do this job after today.
Yeah.
After today. Like Lynch and Werner Herzog have that same kind of quality of mysticism in their thinking, of like how the puzzle pieces work in their mentality. It's like, boom. What was the decision? our business is hard, and a lot of people look for therapeutic possibilities and outlets. And was that part of what went into going to Africa to just work in as basic? What would you say, like almost as a missionary, like as a medical, like what?
No,
What
I was
was
a
the experience?
conservation volunteer. So I would
So
work at conservation issues surrounding specifically the last free-ranging population of black rhinos in the northwest corner of Namibia in an area called the Damra land, and also with the cheetahs of the Cheetah Conservation Fund, because I'd met some expats there in Namibia who were founding that organization, and so I ended up working with them a little bit, in their effort as well. But primarily, I was working in Namibia, excuse me, on the black rhino issue. And in the old days, the idea was, stand in front of the bullet kind of a thing. And that's kind of what I thought I was going to go there to do, is something really fundamental to preventing poaching. But really, what you find out when you get there is first of all, there's a tremendous hubris to have that idea that, here, I'm an American, I can come in and save you. But really what it comes down to is that we're trying to help them recognize the economic value of that wildlife and that environment, and need to help them find ways that they can either profit from it without killing it, because if they kill it, they don't have anything to work with, or to find things that contribute to an ecotourist economy. And so I went there and worked specifically with the people and trying to deal with 85% unemployment and high levels of alcoholism and no opportunity for advancement through additional studies or positions or anything like that. So, it was a very impoverished area. Is that making a lot of noise for you? I'm hearing like a clank, clank, clank.
it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
Okay, well, I'll move this. Maybe that'll make it better. So, no, I mean, the reason that I stopped in Hollywood wasn't because I wasn't working. I mean, that was when I decided to do that. I had just done North and South. I was on Knots Landing for a while. I had written some screenplays. I was close to getting my first directing gig. I had just directed a short film, which I sold to the cable channels. No, I was kind of, I had a lot of momentum, was just finally kind of coming into my own. But, Ethan, I couldn't stand waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand just hearing no and constantly going through the process of auditioning and appealing to people to be able to do what I wanted to do. I didn't feel engaged. And, my worst fear was imagining that I'd be in an apartment in Hollywood when I was, 75 years old. That scared the crap out of me. And I thought, this is a real risk in your life, because, the show business period is just, it's not like it's linear. There's a lot of random luck in it, random circumstances. When I was doing Mike's Murder, I got some great reviews in that. They said I was perfect in that movie by the New York Times. But that year, there was a regime shift at Warner Brothers, and the top brass went away. And that year was Deborah Winger was up for an Academy Award for that picture with Richard Gere. And
Officer and a Gentleman.
Officer and a Gentleman, right? And ordinarily, when you have an Oscar nominee, somebody who's in the press, as popular as Deborah was at that time, you had an award-winning director, and I got the best reviews, of a film that I had to that point. And then instead of like splashing it onto 3,000 screens, which of what they would have done back then, they killed it. And they just put a full-page ad in the New York Times and the LA Times and ran it in 2 art theaters, basically, in the country. Now, that was just because, the idea from, when there's a regime change in the motion picture business, the new people coming in and running a studio don't want the old pictures to succeed, because they want their stuff to look good and make them look good. So there's all kinds of capriciousness in the film business, and I wasn't sure that I was ready to put my whole life on the line for the kind of reward and experience. And I also felt that it was stunting my growth as a human being. So I chose Africa specifically after reading a book called Cry the Kalahari by Mark and Delia Owens. And when you read their book, every page is them doing something, is an engagement, which was trying to make a difference. And that was very appealing. So I said, I'm going to Africa.
So yeah, so how does one do this? Do you just decide you just get yourself a plane ticket, or do you reach out to organizations? I mean, that's an adventurous move.
It was, because I was also self-funded.
Mm-hmm.
I had an ambition to work for Mark and Delia Owens, so I contacted their attorney and I said I was going to go over and wash dishes or do whatever I had to do to be a part of that experience.
I like that about you, William. You will take on any task.
Yeah, you just
for the greater
got
good
to sometimes, right?
Yeah, brilliant.
So he was encouraging to me to do that, but what I didn't know is they had moved from Botswana to Zambia at that point, and they had these just monstrous winter storms, and they were unable to leave their camp for like 3 months and didn't get the mail. Along the way, one of my favorite people in the world, this wonderful actress named Savannah Boucher, she had some friends in Ojai, and she said, "Darling, you better go meet them before you go. Just talk to them, honey." Because she was so worried, because I'd been selling everything that I had to raise the money for myself, right? And so I went to Ojai and met the Tafts. The Tafts had been benefactors of some organizations in Namibia, specifically the Save the Rhino Trust. So they asked me if I wanted to go there, and I thought, well, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. Yeah. And so I went. I made contact with a gentleman named Vance Martin, who's known internationally for his wildlife efforts, and he kind of helped put all the pieces together for me to go there and do that. And it was a life-changing experience, and it wasn't always easy. Sometimes it was incredibly frustrating and angering. It's like, why am I doing this? These people don't care about, what's going on. Why should I? Why am I not putting all this effort and labor into enriching myself or advancing my own stuff? You go through all those kind of vanity things and things that you question why you do certain things. And at the end of it, it was an incredibly rich experience. It taught me a lot.
You got some guts, buddy. I got to tell you, that's not the kind of thing that a lot of my Hollywood friends would go out and embrace, but you did it.
The regional commission there thought I was part of the CIA and was threatening to deport me. Yeah,
I can see that.
So,
there's no way an actor's doing this, right?
That's exactly right. Nobody could understand if you were an actor and you were making money and you were doing this and that. Why would you come here to the middle of nowhere for free and frustrate yourself in these 110-degree this weather and all this hostility? Yeah, it was a big move.
Incredible, man. Have you seen Deborah Winger since you did the movie?
I saw her after that once or twice, but I haven't seen her in decades now.
Yeah. Well, you're off the continent, so to speak. Once you move out of town, man, those things slow down a bit. But
yeah, exactly.
What about Carpenter? Have you talked to Carpenter?
Yes, I've seen him numerous times at events, and John is a unique guy. He's also an auteur. Of course, people already know that he writes, directs, produces, does the music. I mean, he's the real deal. You can't not like John if you've ever worked for him.
Who do you walk away from with all these experiences that you would say, hey, man, I'm so glad I worked with that person. That person's a real friend. Like which one of these people you've worked with has lasted and been the most significant in your life from a professional standpoint?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, James Reed, if you know him from North and South, and he did Remington Steele. He's done a lot of work. Jim and I have remained friends for all of this time. I constantly seek his thoughts and opinions on stuff because he's a very smart man. He should have been a director. He's a good actor, but he was also, he had a very strong talent in directing, and he did direct. I think the television shows he was in. So he has always been a strong part. His wife Wendy as well, who was also in North and South. Alexandra Paul has been in my life. We were madly in love with one another during that movie and for years afterwards, in fact. But I still, reach out to her and vice versa. I see some guys from the film on on location, or I mean on these events, but I don't really hang out with them per se, but probably and I could think of a few other actors, Gary Hudson, David Andrews, guys that all are working, but we still stay in contact.
Did you work with
Forrest
Kevin
Whitaker,
Dobson?
I haven't seen. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Forrest Whitaker was a really close friend of mine for many years, but I haven't seen him now for quite a while.
legend. Forrest
Yeah,
Whitaker, man. Come
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Did you work with Kevin Dobson when you were on Knots Landing?
I don't
Was
remember
it?
who he was, but I could have.
I didn't watch Knots Landing. I apologize, but we did know him, and he
Yeah.
was an MP in the military
Uh-huh.
during Vietnam, so he had
Mm.
great stories. He recently passed away. He'd done Kojak, I think, before he'd gotten to Knots, so he had all these Telly Savalas stories. We're kind of intrigued by these rogue Hollywood elements at times, and one of them is Telly Savalas and the Art of Spoken Word albums. So you'd get this guy, and he was known for Knots Landing and probably had all these Knots Landing stories ready to go, but you really wanted to know what it was like going to Vegas with Telly Savalas. And when the studio like decided to pay his gambling debt in order to get him to do Kojak, those are the stories. But I didn't know if you guys had shared time on the set because that was a pretty big cast, if I remember right.
I was thrilled to meet Julie Harris, who was,
Yeah,
she was in James Dean's East of Eden,
yeah,
right? And she, was very kind to me, when we were filming. And the other cast members, I didn't make great connections with. It wasn't a good experience for me, to be honest. Um, I was on for as a recurring character, and when it just felt like the energy wasn't really all that interesting between me and Lisa Hartman, uh, and so they decided that I was going to go away. I was sort of being set up to follow after Alec Baldwin and to become her boyfriend, but the just chemistry just wasn't there between us. So it was one of the reasons that I decided to leave show business for a while, to be honest, because
really.
they had, yeah, because they had this scene where she discovers that I'm this undercover reporter who's in her band just to get the dirt on her because Alec Baldwin had recently died. And, there was just all that drama that they were trying to stir up by me being the undercover agent, but sort of trying to ingratiate myself with her romantically. And they gave me the script in the last one where they were decided that, she was going to find out. And, they changed the script to have her. First, she was spitting in my face.
Oof.
And then later on, she was supposed to punch me and knock me over a table. Now, I used to fight taekwondo tournaments, and open martial arts tournaments. So, you know, it's not that a woman can't knock me out or knock me over or something like that. But I find myself having arguments about, like, first of all, why would she spit in my face? She's got the paper right there. Why wouldn't she smack me with the paper? I mean, how rude and crude and weird is that she would spit in my face? So I won that battle, but then they came back with, well, she needs to hit you and knock you over a table. And I'm like, you know what? I just did a tournament last week. I'm sorry, but I don't think even if I were drunk that you could hit me hard enough to knock me over a table. And just the way she was justifying it, it's just like, this is not what I want to be a part of.
Right, exactly. Haven't these producers seen the All Valley tournament? Don't they know what some of these dudes are made of? I mean, come on. It's interesting to hear you say that. And do you have advice for like actors who are, how to behave when they arrive on a set when they're new? I have like a group, I have some ground rules from my days at Warner Brothers that I try to like throw out there that kind of help people in terms of how they get along. But do you have something you have a real rich set of experiences. What would you tell someone who's they said, "Hey, William, I got a job on a movie. Hey, here's three things you should never do, and here's something you should do," or what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, make sure you did your homework before you get there. You know,
Mm,
because it's you're under pressure in those moments, and you better have that language, the dialogue, your ideas about who this person is down pat. And because in those moments of stress, you don't want to be searching for your handles at that moment. You know what I mean? That's got to be second nature to you. That's really important.
correct. Yeah.
Third thing is be nice to everybody in this set because you have no idea who that, third assistant production guy is going to be in 2 years from now.
Isn't that, not to press the brakes on, but isn't that one of the most overlooked yet most important things to realize in our business?
Yeah.
It's amazing who doesn't grasp that.
Yeah. I also think that, you have to remember that for whatever length of time that you're in that movie or that television show, that's an artificial world and an artificial environment. And it's very easy to get sucked into that. And it's really important to remember, that that's a job. You're going to a job and you come home. And, because, what actors do, my wife, was a little unsettled by a job that I had a couple of years ago where I was playing the lead in this, one of the leads in this movie. And the actress that I was working with was a very attractive actress who was kind of like a social influencer or something like that. And for my backstory in this film, I made the choice that she was somebody who I really had an interest in romantically, but it didn't work out, or there was police rules why we couldn't fraternize together and stuff like that. But it was an undercurrent of something that I thought was really important to this character. And I don't know about other people, but, I know it's acting, I know you're playing, but you do try to fall in love with that person a little bit. You do try to find that thing that, you zero in on, you go, oh, I like that about them, or they're this, or something is very attractive. And there wasn't any threat to my wife. I wasn't about ready to leave her or something like that. But I do try to submerge myself to the place where you can feel what it's like. And my wife got threatened by that, and I had to explain to her, no. I can turn this on and I can turn it off, but I need to explore this and find this, And I think that's really important because I think there's a lot of marriages and relationships that struggle with going on a set. If you're there for a long time and you develop relationships with people, and some of them are tried and true and good relationships like I have with Jim and Wendy, and others are momentary and superficial. So It's important to remember who you are, keep your feet in the ground.
Yeah, very true. And you've done a good job at doing exactly that. What's next for you?
Well, that's a good question. I still do voiceover work. I'd love to do more of it. I've decided that I'm going to start doing some more roles again.
Mm-hmm.
So
we need it. We need it from you. We need it.
Well, thank you very much. So I'm working in that direction again. I'd still do a lot of my activism work. I don't know if I would call it activism. I like to contribute. Okay. So there's a lot more contributions that I can make in the world, I think. And so I have a certain number of, or a certain amount of energy that needs to go in that direction, and some other directions that I need to go, or some other energy that I'd like to put more back into filmmaking again. It's a whole different animal today than it was years ago, right? So I have to kind of learn some of the ropes of what people are doing today and how they're going about it. I do have another offer for a film from a guy named Terry Wickham to do a piece called Anomaly, where I play a character in that's kind of a supernatural and horror film mix. And hopefully he's going to get that project put together. Hopefully I'll be filming that, in the next 6 months or a year. So I want to do more work again.
Well, you got talent, and I was actually looking at some of your political clips, which I thought was super impressive because of the nature of why you were getting into politics was something special, I think, to get in there because of, what you thought money and PAC money was doing to the political system on a broad landscape was really interesting. And I want to get into that next time we talk. We could definitely use more of you. In
that's
the
kind
film
of you. Thank
world,
you.
though. I mean, it's the way it goes. If you're good, you're good. And let's be honest, our industry can use more of William O.
Thank you.
And we were shamelessly recruiting you for A Christmas Carol with Ron Perlman and the gang actually over the weekend, because leave it to us to take advantage of a shameless opportunity. We we will do whatever we can do to actually bring epic personalities to an epic cause. But to be honest with you, it's overshadowed by some of the great things you've done.
Thank you.
and what you've done and what you've done to help people and what you've experienced. And are you going to hit the convention circuits soon? You got any dates out there people need to know, or are you just waiting to hear?
No, I've got one coming up October 23rd to the 25th in Lexington, Kentucky. There's the Horror Hound or something like that, I think that we're doing there. That's October. I have a few other things that I don't want to share until the ink is signed. You know what I mean? The ink's on the paper. But there's a few things like that we're going to be doing. I am a guest host of a live talk radio program that is accessible through the internet. It's a sort of a regional program that for the Central Coast of California. And on that, I'm a host, and I interview people like you're doing, but on specifically about issues that are going on in the country or in the community.
So what you're saying is you do this, but better.
No. I think you're a very good interviewer.
Oh, come on, man. Way too kind. The truth of it is, man, is you've had a very interesting and eclectic life. It's impossible to touch base on all of the elements and all of the intrigue in one episode. And I was more or less serious when we were talking about interesting early lines from the Travolta film and how they would be good chapter titles. I do think there's a book in the making, and you must have thought of that at some point.
I have been asked about doing that a few times. I didn't really take notes when I was doing all these things, though, so I'm kind of like intimidated by the idea of trying to recreate events and remember everything. I mean, yes, I'm very fortunate. I've been to 40 countries in the world. I've been, spent months in other countries doing things from Save the Rhino Trust to, movies to, just travel. And, then the films that I've had. And that's really part of the thing that I'm enjoying right now, Ethan, is I turn a TV on and I go, oh, yeah, I know that person. Oh, yeah, I worked with them. Oh, yeah, well, that's the location we went to. Whether that's in, politics, which, by the way, Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people, if you ever heard
that's
that
true,
expression.
Yes. It's very accurate.
So when I see, politicians that I've known or worked with or, actors, going way back to like Julie Harris, who knew, James
Robert
Dean.
Wise. Yeah, James Dean.
I mean, that's kind of cool for me. This guy that I knew that worked with Brando, and that's part of the reward at the other end here right now is realizing of all these people that I've gotten to work with or knew over the years. David Carradine, who came up to our area to be part of the film festival, and I got to rob a train on horseback. Things like that. I've got some good stories that I can share that were really fun.
Yeah, and we just lost his brother Robert, who was a part of the cast of A Christmas Carol last week. And
oh, shame.
Yeah, and both actually Keith and Robert have both done it. Keith, fortunately, is still with us. But when you look at these people that you say you've worked with, William, or that you got it backwards, bro. They worked with you, and that's how they're telling the story. Whether it's Deborah Winger, David Lynch, rest in peace, John Carpenter, they are saying, "I got a chance to work with you."
Well, if this whole talks thing doesn't work out, you should be a life coach.
Listen, man, well, you're the life coach. Come on. Between the two of us, bro, I think we should just record catchphrases from you and put it on a playlist. And it'd be like, situation, this is the situation, and this is the track you press. Because in talking to you the other day, and I think we talked for the better part of an hour or so, just catching up on, these interesting aspects that people aren't aware. I mean, look, Hollywood and people in it, to find the solution in going out and being of service in a place like Africa, and to do it in a day and age when it wasn't about catching a social media clip, I mean, that says something to your character.
No, thank you.
Because we know we are surrounded. I mean, we're behind enemy lines here in town, and we are surrounded by people who, they make it all about them every step of the way. And it should be about the individual to a point, but whether it's your foray into politics and the reasons you did that, which I found fascinating. And I love the fact that you actually created, if I remember right, on the political landscape, a document that said, hey, we're going to sign this to make sure we don't have a campaign slandering each other, and we don't have a campaign that's taking, PAC money or money from the outside. This is going to be a local funded campaign on local issues for local people. And you were the only one who signed it.
Yeah.
But I remember
Well,
thinking that, what's that? Go ahead.
well, money in politics is something that is very important to me, and I've been working on that issue for 15 years, since the
Yeah.
Citizens United decision back in 2010. And in fact, I was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., talking to different representatives about how we can change that. And I've written legislation for Congress called the Corporate Political Expenditure Disclosure Act. And I've written a piece for our own city called Integrity in Our Elections. And money is having a very profound deleterious effect on our policies.
Now, look, the world is at a place where I think they've lost a lot of hope in the political system. But do you think there's reason to be optimistic that we can get past this sort of age of corruption and big money buying and basically turning into complete whores our politicians? Because that's what they are. They're basically whores on the street corner now, most of them.
I think it's going to be hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube to completely, if I'm
Yeah.
honest. But I think that we don't have any choice but to be optimistic. And I think, the founding fathers did an amazing job of anticipating some of the problems we've had. The real litmus test will be that once we're through this dark part of the woods, if we make the kind of changes to actually make real guardrails instead of norms, considering, sorry, uh, instead of instead of depending on norms. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. Was that your agent telling you to get the fuck off this show before your career is damaged?
No, it was my wife, but I imagine you probably want to go. You've probably been on here as long as you can take, I suppose.
No, man, I actually find this all very interesting and very intriguing. And when you say, when you're realistic about putting the toothpaste back in the tube, but remaining optimistic, that is the answer for most of us. Remain optimistic and we'll see what breaks. I mean, in the 12th round of a fight, if you keep swinging, eventually something will drop in front of you. So continue though.
Well, I think the using your metaphor, having done a number of tournaments and stuff like that, when you're starting to lose, you usually go back to the same technique that was been your moneymaker in the past, right? Say, let's just say that's a left hook or a straight right or something like that. And if that hasn't been working for you, it doesn't make sense to go back to it. And yet that is our tendency when we get into trouble. So one of the things that we need to do right now is to take and make an assessment of the circumstances now. And maybe the left hook isn't important. Maybe you need to go for more of a body punch. Maybe you need to use more jabs. Maybe there's a kick here as instead of, what you have normally won your fights with. And we have to reassess that right now. And I think there's not enough discussion. I'm supposed to give a speech on this in a couple of weeks where
Where are you doing it?
there's a local gentleman who's put together an event here, in our community, and I don't know, hundreds of people are supposed to show up. We'll see.
This is where I wish I lived closer to you because I would definitely crash that. But go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have to take into consideration that, policies and behaviors and in our evolutionary instincts are not necessarily in accordance with how the world is operating right now. I'll just give you a quick metaphor. I call it the garage door theory. And the garage door theory is that it's 1947 and you're coming home with your wife in your big Buick. You don't have power steering, you have power brakes, you have a 3 on the tree. It's raining outside. You come home and it's got a wooden garage door that doesn't open with a garage door opener. Who's going to get out of the car? Is it you or your wife? It's you. And who's going to open that wooden door? It's you. And who's probably driving? Probably you. And there's nothing sexist about that. It was just in the olden days, we needed to use those biological differences, and those biological differences helped us to identify ourselves, helps to identify our genders and our roles. But today, technology and equipment and all of that kind of stuff has leveled the playing field. So women can do all of the biologically advantaged things that men did in the past. They can do them now. And that has left, a lot of young men with a sense of being lost. They're the highest number of people that are sitting in the morgue from suicide right now. They are the ones that are sitting in homes in their parents' basements, the 18 to 29-year-olds I'm talking about. They are more girls in college than men. There are more first homes being bought by women than by men. And you look at the demographic spread in, who's voting for Republicans right now, and males are overwhelmingly going towards, Republican conservative politics, the authoritarian, the patriarchal, because for them, that still resonates. Something they recognize that sets them apart as being men, as opposed to just being a part of the population. And we don't really talk about those kind of things. We don't really look at how behaviors and technology are impacting democracy. We simply think that, we just need the right candidate who's going to say the right things. Well, every candidate says the same thing at the end of the day, because they all basically have the same needs. I want a good job. I want some kind of health care. I want a place that's safe. I want a home. And, I want a little bit of time off. We want love and affection. And those are all the same. It doesn't matter. Nobody can say it any better than that, right? But it's the other things that are affecting our choices. It's other influences that are having impact, and they become flavors that are good for this election, but not so good for the next election. I don't know if that made sense to you, but that's what I think that's so important, that we actually pick ourselves up and look around and go, okay, what changes do we need to make here? Because the world is not the same as it was 20 years ago, nor 100 years ago, for God's sakes. Our needs are, but the world is not.
It's you articulate a very interesting point there, and leave it to you to do it so stylistically that you take me back to a time that I'm old enough to remember when the Genie garage door opener was a big fucking deal.
Yeah, right.
I love that was factored into your point, because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember there was a time when we would have to pull up to the garage and get out and open it.
Yes. Well, what about just the cars?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, what about just cars? Like, in the old days, and a little older than what I am, but the cars didn't have power steering. You remember parallel parking when you didn't have a vehicle with power steering? So there are daily tasks that help men understand who they are. And right now, men are overcompensating. There's a performative masculinity that's going on. And these are all social constructs. They're not ingrained in us. They're not natural energies or natural behaviors. They're social constructs. And there's a whole lot of men that are fleeing to find some ways to prove their masculinity. What contractor have you ever met that didn't have facial hair, wraparound sunglasses, and a baseball cap? Right? I mean, and of course, most men are driving pickup trucks because they have to identify. They need something to identify their gender. And those kind of things all play a part in our legislative choices and our choices of representatives, and how we behave and what we think and how we feel. If you don't feel good about who you are as a man, what do? We don't have threshold tests anymore. When you're 18, you might as well be 19 or 20. There's no threshold that you cross. How do you enter from being a boy into, the metaphorical? I don't know if that metaphor. It's into the emotional realm of being a man. What is the difference?
What's the answer to that, would you say?
Well, I think part of that is that we need to recognize what a masculine archetype is and gravitate to that. Look, to me, I don't mince any bones about it. I can't stand Trump, right? I think he's a horrible human being and a terrible, terrible example of masculinity. This is a guy that, couldn't go fight in Vietnam because he had bone spurs. He had numerous affairs. He cheated people. I mean, he's immoral. He's corrupt. That's not what I understood a man to be. When I grew up, a man was like Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, quiet, reserved, polite, used his strength when it was important and necessary, protected people, etc. Those kinds of men with respect and strength are the kinds of men that I admired, and I think that we're missing some of that in today's world.
Atticus Finch is a great example, and again, Boo Radley, Robert Duvall, we just lost him too. Do you think that Harper wrote that book, or Truman Capote pitched in? Speaking of
Well,
Atticus
Truman
Finch.
Capote is supposed to be her best friend in that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have no more knowledge about it than that. But, it's one of my favorite books of all time. And
It's incredible. It's an incredible book.
anyway, so, I pontificated enough there. I'm on my soapbox, but I genuinely believe that we really haven't adapted. We haven't had enough time to adapt to some of the technological advances that are changing how we approach the world. I mean, we've gotten all these cell phones that are supposed to be, and internet and social media is supposed to help us connect, and I think we're further apart than we ever have been.
Unfortunately true, but maybe something can bring us back together to some degree.
Well, maybe this is just a learning curve for us. Maybe we'll put them down and consider. But I appreciate that just in you're doing this interview that you're doing it on Zoom with me, so I can see you, I can talk to you, I can see your humanness.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
having connection and community, that's important.
I agree with you. It is important, and I love that you're taking an approach that goes wide in terms of, what would I describe as like human spirituality and well-being of all involved. Your interests go far beyond what you and your own career would amount to. You get involved in things and seem to be dedicated to things that are much, much bigger, which is admirable, William. That's admirable stuff.
Well, it's a natural extension, isn't it? I mean, what are stories? I mean, doesn't Aristotle or was it Socrates that said there's 9 great stories in life, right?
Yeah. Was that Plato or was that
Plato? Maybe.
I mean, it might
can't-
have been Socrates or Socrates, as Keanu Reeves refers to him. Socrates.
Right. Maybe it was Pluto. I think, or Plato.
Plato?
Sorry,
I don't know.
I think
I
you're
don't know.
right. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I am forever grateful, eternally grateful for my education is the education I got in the humanities and understanding stories. Einstein said that the point of zero depends upon the observer, and therefore there can be no true point of zero. And the whole idea of art, in my opinion, is a perspective. It is a perspective on what zero is. And your perspective of zero is different than mine. And when you're successful with your art, I can see your perspective. I'm enriched. I grow. I see more complexity than I knew before. And I think that's part of what's missing right now from many of the stories we're telling.
Yeah. Impressive way to see it. I'm proud of you, man. You're doing some
Thank you.
interesting stuff out there, and I'd like to see this movie come together for you soon. If not, let's get something else going that's exciting because the world's a better place when you are in action in it.
Well, from your lips to God's ears. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
As
Easy
the
to
saying
say.
goes.
In your case, easy to say. I'd like to get back and do a part 2. And focus on a few other things. Is there anything we missed? Do you have a one crazy story or two that I smashed through without letting you articulate it? We should do some Lou Grant stories, but
that's a long time ago. I don't know how many I have of that, but yeah, I mean, thank you. I'm flattered. I'd be happy to come back if you should choose to do that. And there are a lot of stories around stuff that happened when I first got to Los Angeles that aren't really about movies, but about the approach to getting a job in the movies.
Yeah.
That I find very fascinating and interesting. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of adventures to talk about being in doing conservation work in a foreign country for a year.
Mhm.
Whatever you want to go with it, man, I'm there.
Well, from the conservation work to working with Deborah Winger, John Carpenter, and David Lynch, and to getting involved in politics to straighten the machine out, I think we can all recognize the epic contributions of
Thank
one
you.
legend known as William Ostrander.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you for taking the time, man. This has been fun. You are as gracious a guest as we've ever had. You've been very easy to talk to, and it's an adventure when you pick up the phone. I mean, you definitely. I will say this: the conversation with William doesn't go where you expect it to go when you call him, which is a great thing. That is a great thing, And I'm proud of the work you've done, man. I'm proud of the way you've stitched your experiences together to be part of the cause for the common good, man. You deserve to be championed for that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate your interest.
We'll see you again soon.
I hope so. Be well.
They come out of darkness, sometimes with thunder, sometimes with lightning. Their presence means death. The prison master was afraid of him. The guards were afraid of him. The town was afraid of him. Lucifer is coming for you. Rest easy, Jack Carr said in a low tone. You're in the final 30 seconds of your life. No quarter. No quarter. Kill all masters. Coming soon.